Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's well. I think we'll give a few more minutes before we start the meeting.
Hello.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm trying to scroll through the names here. Brian Stilley, are you on the call? If not, Jamie, as our vice chair, if you don't mind, would you mind getting us started? Call the meeting to order. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. I'll go ahead and read the intro for electronic meetings. And then if Brian doesn't join us, Jamie, if you don't mind getting the meeting started, appreciate that. So again, welcome. Pursuant to the declared state of emergency in the Commonwealth of Virginia in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and to protect the public health and safety of the LRTP subcommittee members, staff, and the general public, today's meeting is being held electronically. This electronic meeting is required to complete essential business on behalf of the region. Per the requirements of the Code of Virginia, the agenda and all supporting documentation were posted on the TPO website for public review, and electronic copies of this information were provided to LRTP members and other interested parties. Today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The live stream is available for viewing on the Regional Connection YouTube channel, and the recording will be made available on the HRTPO website. The general public was provided an opportunity to comment on today's agenda in advance of the meeting via two options. One, members of the public were invited to email comments to the LRTP, and two, members of the public were invited to call into a dedicated phone line where comments could be recorded for the LRTP subcommittee. No comments were received via either option as of 48 hours before this meeting. Before we begin today's remote meeting, I would like to remind members of a few important housekeeping rules. Everyone is asked to keep their phones and computers muted except for when you are providing input. Please identify yourself by name and locality or agency, or the agency you represent when you provide input. Do the same should you provide a motion or a second. All votes taken today must be made by roll call and recorded in the minutes. Thank you for your cooperation and patience. In attendance will now, after we call the meeting to order, attendance will be recorded by roll call. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Since Brian's not here, unless he is and wants to pop in, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask that we go ahead and take roll.
All right. So City of Chesapeake.
This is Benjamin Cameron, President.
I think I saw Ben and Troy from Chesapeake. City of Franklin. Gloucester County.
Hear me? I'm here. Carol. Carol, here.
Carol, thank you. City of Hampton.
So Mike Hayes for the City of Hampton.
Thank you, Mike. Isle of Wight, I'm Jamie.
Present.
James City County.
Paul's here.
Thank you, Paul. City of Newport News.
Angela Rico here. If Brian's not going to be here, I'm trying to see where he is.
Thank you, Angela. City of Norfolk.
Hey, Dale, I'm here.
Thanks, Debbie. City of Pocosin. Portsmouth.
Carl Jackson here.
Thanks, Carl. Southampton County.
This is Beth Lewis here.
Thank you, Beth. City of Suffolk.
This is Robert Lewis here.
Hi, Robert. Thank you. And Virginia Beach.
Dale, it's Katie Shannon. I'm here.
Thank you, Katie. Williamsburg. York County.
Tim Cross here.
Thank you, Tim. Hampton Roads Transit.
Sam Sink here, and we've got Ray Amoruso as well.
Yeah, hello everyone.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Ray. Williamsburg Area Transit Authority. DRPT. VDOT.
I'm here, Eric Stringfield, and I believe we'll have Angela Biney and Ray Hunt joining through the live video stream.
Thank you, Eric. And the Virginia Port Authority.
Good afternoon, Barbara Nelson here.
Thank you, Barbara. Is there anybody else on this call that I have not called on?
Mark Shea from Virginia Beach.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Tracy Schoenfeld, City of Chesapeake.
Thank you, Tracy. Anybody else? Okay. Before we get started, I would like to make a couple of introductions. We We do have our new Deputy Executive Director, Dr. Pavitra Sarathi. For those that have been here for a few years, may have recalled Pavitra used to run the LRTP department a number of years back. So she is back in the area. We're super excited to have her back at the HRTPO. She is on today's call. I don't want to put her on the spot, but Pavitra, if you want to throw a wave up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Sorry, my connection had problems earlier. As Dale mentioned, really happy to be back. I met some of you, not all of you, the last time I was here, but super excited. Dale's been keeping me updated on the long range plan. I've got quite a dose of all the projects, but I don't know if I remember everything she's told me, but plan to be engaged and hopefully we'll see more of you as I spend more time here. So thank you again, Dale.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes, she's come at a very exciting time. Throwing a lot at her. And then we also have a new LRTP member, Brandon Rogers. He's kind of got like this fuzzy effect on his screen right now, but we're super excited to have Brandon join our team with Steve and Teresa as well. And we're going to take it easy on him for the next couple of weeks, but then he's gonna get a lot of LRTP tasks as well. So just wanted to introduce our team. I don't know if anyone else on the call has any introductions to make, any new members. Thank you.
Okay, I think we wanted to move to agenda item number 2, the public comment period.
And we did not receive any submitted public comments.
Okay, and I guess agenda item 3 would be submitted public comments prior to the meeting. We didn't get anything.
We did get comments when the agenda went out on the prioritization report, which I will touch on in my prioritization scores presentation. And then I will also be forwarding a public comment that was submitted from the Southern Environmental Law Center on the prioritization scores.
Okay, so that puts us at agenda item 4, approval of the agenda. And I'm guessing that we need a motion and a second.
Yes, and we don't need to do a roll call vote for the approval of the agenda and the minutes. You can do that by consensus, but we do need the motion and the second.
So if I could get a motion to approve the agenda.
Eric Stringfield, motion.
And can we get a second?
Katie Shannon, I second.
So if we vote by consensus, if anyone says no, can you say something or put a comment in the chat or something? It looks like we have approval by consensus, so the agenda is approved. The next item is the minutes, and I believe we're going to need a motion to approve the minutes of the November 4th meeting.
Tim Cross moves approval. Carl Jackson seconds.
Okay, and if there are any objections, someone could speak out, please. Okay, with no objection, approve the minutes by consensus. And taking a look at the agenda, I believe the next item is the candidate projects, and I think that's going to come from Dale.
Yes, thank you. And then I have a presentation for you today, so go ahead and oh wait, sorry, jumping ahead here. All right, can you all see my slides? Fantastic. Okay, so today we're bringing back the draft project prioritization scores for LRTP subcommittee approval, or recommending TTAC approval of these scores and ultimately board approval of the prioritization scores. So just a little background. Again, we are documenting our 2045 LRTP update through a series of reports. We've produced the 4 you see here to date. And I keep driving this home that we have to have the 2045 LRTP adopted by June of 2021. It is not that far off, and we have a lot of prerequisite steps that we have to have the board approved to meet that June 2021 deadline. So in terms of candidate project evaluation, as you all know, we started out with a massive candidate project list. I think we started out with over 600 candidate projects that we trimmed down and screened to make sure those candidate projects were LRTP applicable, and that these candidate projects were also compatible with locality comprehensive plans. As part of our evaluation process, we identified committed projects, conducted some environmental mitigation consultations, some Title VI environmental justice analysis, some spatial overlay analysis, which fed into our prioritization tool. Over the last almost a month, we've had stakeholders reviewing both the draft scores and the draft report. So again, today we're here to ask for this committee to recommend TTAC approval of these scores. So just
I'm sorry, this is Katie Shannon. Just a quick question. So the scores that we're going to see today, are those incorporate all of the stakeholder comments that were received, I guess last Wednesday, the 16th was the last, was the time frame for that?
Yes, I was up till 1:30 in the morning.
Ooh. Okay, thank you.
I was teasing earlier. I hope you guys are kind to me.
I'm sorry. I hope you got some caffeine and a much needed holiday break coming up.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So with the COVID-19 pandemic, we did roll out the review of these draft scores in a different method than we have historically. So we had a lot of emails going back and forth, a lot of email attachments with tables and various different attachments. So I do appreciate. I know it wasn't as easy as sitting in a room and maybe going through a long presentation, but you guys were fantastic reviewing all the detail that goes into producing these scores. We even Keith and I actually did a narrated presentation to FTAC members because we couldn't present to them in person, so that they could get a little more background on how we develop prioritization scores. So again, we produced a prioritization report to go along with the draft scores. Typically, we don't produce the report until after the scores get to this point, but because we're in this COVID-19 pandemic, we felt like all this background was necessary for people to really understand what the scores represent. I just kept these slides in because I love this animation. It made me happy. In terms of reviewing, on the left are all the different committees, advisory and subcommittees that we reached out to review the draft scores. So in addition to the LRTP subcommittee, we presented to TTAC. As I just stated, we also distributed the draft scores and the report to the Freight Transportation Advisory Committee, the Community Advisory Committee, Active Transportation Subcommittee, and the Regional Transit Coordination Working Group, and the public. So we've been doing this over the last, let's say almost 4 weeks. I've listed on the right the localities and agencies that we did receive comments from. And as Katie asked, the feedback that we did receive has been addressed. Some of them were technical that actually needed to be incorporated into the tool. Some were more general comments that just required, responses from us to let them know, how certain things were being factored in, maybe not just in the prioritization process, but the overall LRTP process. One of the things I mentioned previously when I was presenting the draft economic vitality scores, and also at the TTAC presentation, is we recognized with a couple of our measures in our economic vitality component, we weren't exactly convinced that the measures we were using that were coming out of the model were the best way to be reporting them. So we've been investigating a better way to use the model to produce these two variables that you see on the left, again, that are under economic vitality. And that's reduction in forecasted regional travel time and reduction forecasted regional peak period delay. Originally, I was using output straight out of the model. The model has free flow and congested travel times. What we did is we modified that methodology to more closely match what SmartScale does. And the short of it is when SmartScale is looking at improvement in travel time and regional delay, they start with not looking at every link in the model, but they want to identify the problem links. Essentially, they look at the no-build scenario, and any link that is operating below the posted speed limit, those are the ones you want to see if the project is built and incorporated into the model. Does it help those congested links? So that was part of our methodology change. And then also, I realized when I was pulling out and comparing, and this is way in the weeds, but comparing free flow and congested travel times on our links in our region, it's really link delay, and it doesn't fully capture volume to the extent that it should. So then I matched SmartScale's methodology where they take more regional numbers and they apply a peak hour factor. And this is a better way to capture regional delay and not just delay along a corridor for maybe one car. So those changes have been incorporated into the draft scores that you'll see today. And it did affect some scores. So you'll see a slight change in some of the economic vitality scores and then the overall score and rank of some projects. So in terms of public comments, we did receive one public comment from Southern Environmental Law Center. We received the comment after about the same time the LRTP agenda went out, so that was why it was not a part of your agenda. I will be forwarding this to the LRTP subcommittee because they do call out some projects that are within some localities in our region. I've summarized on the slide their comments. SELC does support advancing transit and rail in the region. They continue to support HRTP's consideration of projects focused on expanding travel options and cleaner transportation modes. They also want to ensure that projects promote climate resilience, and that they do in their letter comments acknowledge that both the TPO and localities have taken some noteworthy steps. Then they go on to highlight 6 projects here. Within these 6 projects, there are some exceptions that they are noting, some concerns. So again, I will forward this letter. I think it's like 5 pages. I'll be forwarding it to the subcommittee so that you can take a more in-depth look at it. And then as part of our prioritization report, we want to incorporate these comments and then any feedback, if it's coming from localities or from VDOT, we want to incorporate that as well and also respond to the Southern Environmental Law Center. Are there any questions before I move on to the next slide? All right. So again, when I show the scores, and I won't show all of them because I can't fit them all on the screen, but I will be forwarding a handout of the updated scores in our prioritization report, and in the tables you'll see this is how the scores are organized. If we show the scores for project utility, economic vitality, and project viability. All projects are ranked by total score within their category and by roadway system. If you see these darker colored squares, that means that project was one of the top 5 scoring projects within that scoring component. So as an example, the very top project, 664 Monitor Merrimack, that project was one of the top scoring projects in project utility, in economic vitality, and project viability, and total overall. And then another example, if you look at Mills Godwin Bridge under primary, it was one of the top scoring economic vitality projects, and then one of the top scoring projects for Bridge and Tunnel overall. So these are the updated bridge and tunnel candidate projects. I will note that the change with our feedback that we received and the change in the economic vitality, there was a switch between project 406 and 403, I believe, from what was previously presented to now. So the scores changed by maybe about 5 points or so, and phase 2 of high-rise scores slightly higher than 664 Monitor Merrimack Terminal to College Drive. So that is a change that I noted with the economic vitality updated methodology. And then for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through every project unless you guys want me to. Just scream out. I can't see everyone's face, but I'll hear you. So these are some draft prioritization scores for our highway projects. Again, not all highway projects. We scored 152 different highway projects. So I just grabbed the top 2 for each roadway system. So for interstate, our top 2 highway projects were 664 Hampton Coliseum to Terminal Avenue, total score of 192, followed by Chesapeake Expressway widening with a total score of 175. Top scoring primary projects are J. Clyde Morris Boulevard in Newport News with a score of 167, and then George Washington Memorial Highway in Gloucester for 166. For secondary, top scoring projects, Commonwealth Drive Extension, with a score of 109, and then Moortown Road Extension with a score of 106. And then for urban, Greenbelt Segment Phase 1, London Bridge to Princess Anne, score of 172, followed by Indian River Road with a score of 151. Does someone have a question? So here are the top scoring interchange projects. We had 26 overall, so this is just a subset. The top scoring project overall was A phase of the 64-264, actually phase A with a score of 214. I believe this was the top scoring project overall across all categories. With our change in our economic vitality scores, as well as some different modifications and data input, Independence Boulevard was one of the projects whose scores changed a little bit, so its rank came up. So now it's the second highest scoring interchange project with a score of 208, followed by phase E of the interchange with a score of 206. And then our intermodal and freight projects. These are all the candidate intermodal freight projects. So you can see Hampton Boulevard at Terminal is the top scoring intermodal project with a score of 190, followed by Creamy Island Access Road with a score of 161. Transit, these scores did not change from what you saw previously, but I did update some of the terminology based on some feedback from HRT. One of the things we changed was removing light rail from some of these projects. So you can see for project 519, it now says high capacity transit extension to Suffolk, where previously it had said light rail. Since it's too early, since this is really just a very conceptual project, we shouldn't be identifying a particular mode for any of these transit candidate projects. So the scores didn't change, just cleaned up some of the terminology for these transit projects. So the highest scoring fixed skyway project would be Peninsula High Capacity Transit project with a score of 182. And then we have our maritime transit, so the ferry service candidate project, Norfolk to Hampton, score of 178. And then we also included our rail transit candidate projects that you can see with a higher speed intercity passenger rail tier 1 with a score of 168. And then our active transportation candidate projects, we had 54 active transportation projects, so this is a small subset. These scores didn't change much. There might be a slight change in 1 or 2 projects, but it wasn't significant. Top scoring project is the overall Birthplace of America Trail with a score of 212, followed by the Southampton Roads Trail with a score of 206. And you'll notice throughout our active transportation projects, and this is also applies to our highway, some projects are like an overall parent project, and then there's smaller pieces of that same corridor that we also scored, again, with highway and active transportation. So today we're looking for a recommendation from the LRTP subcommittee to recommend TTAC approval of these draft scores at their January meeting, and ultimately having the board approve the scores at the January board meeting. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions from you.
And Neil, before we take questions real quick, can you just go over the process after if we approve the draft scores and it goes to the TPO, then what happens after that?
Once the scores become final, when the board approves them, and really because we're in such a tight time frame, we're actually going to start prior to is fiscal constraints. And I have a presentation. The next two presentations actually start to touch on that process for fiscal constraint. But we use these scores and our long-range revenue forecast to start selecting projects by category and system to develop the ultimate constrained 2045 LRTP.
So at this point, approving the draft prioritization report is basically agreeing to everybody's scores before we enter the fiscal constraint step.
Correct.
Did anyone have any questions or discussion? Does someone want to make?
Amy, this is Robert. All right, I've got one quick question, Dale. I'm on that previous slide where the intermodal, the bicycle stuff was in there. Birthplace of America's top scoring project, but yet there's a lot of other projects under that are subsets of that. I'm still a little bit confused as to how that works.
Some localities and agencies, they all have their different pieces of this trail. And the chances of us fiscally constraining the entire trail are probably pretty slim. So being able to identify those smaller segments that make up the larger trail, and again, this applies to not just Birthplace of America, but also Southampton Roads Trail and other regional trails. When you can start to prioritize the smaller sections and see how they, interact within the locality and with other regional trails, then you can start to chip away and build those. So that's sort of the mindset behind scoring both the bigger project and then the smaller independent projects that comprise larger projects.
Okay, thank you. And with that, Jamie, I will move the approval of this report to the TTAC for consideration.
Can I throw in one quick question? There's one, I don't know how much we want to get into the individual project detail. I know I had written, Dale, just questions on our Freeman Avenue. I didn't know if that fell out through funding. It was in the 2040, and I had it in the report, I guess, at several check-in points, and just didn't know, one, if we want to get to that level of detail, and two, if so, why that's not included right now.
So Freeman is actually on our committed list. So it's automatically, because it's a committed project, it's automatically going to be included in the 2045 LRTP and doesn't need a prioritization score.
Perfect. That's what I was hoping, but just wanted to confirm. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, and just to remind everyone, we only produce scores for the 4 candidate projects. Not all of these candidate projects are going to make the ultimate plan. Probably a very small percentage will make the ultimate plan. And then just to clarify, Robert, if you could amend your motion, so it's not just the report, but the scores themselves recommend approval.
All right, I will so amend my motion. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And can we get a second for approval of the draft report and the scores?
I'll second. Troy from Chesapeake.
So it's a motion and a second. Are we going to vote by roll call for this one?
City of Chesapeake,
Yes, approved.
Gloucester County,
Approve.
Carol, I think that was a yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's all right. Hampton,
Yes.
Isle of Wight,
Yes.
Yes.
James City County,
Yes.
Newport News,
Yes.
Norfolk,
Yes.
Portsmouth, Carl. Oh, I said.
Put it in the chat box.
Southampton County,
Yes.
Suffolk,
Yes.
Virginia Beach,
Yes.
York County,
Yes.
Hampton Roads Transit.
So Ray Amoruso says yes.
Thank you, Ray. VDOT.
Yes.
Thank you, Eric. And Virginia Port Authority.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Unanimous yeses. I like it. It's a Christmas present to me. Thank you.
Madam Chair, before we move to the next item, could I ask one quick question?
Sure.
Dale, you said that the Southern Legislative Law Center comments needed to be reviewed. Did any of those comments have any potential impact to change the scoring or the rankings?
In my opinion, no.
Okay.
They're just comments that if these projects were to move forward towards construction, that they be considered and, possibly to maybe not even construct some of these projects. But no, great question, but it wouldn't affect the scores themselves.
Okay, thank you.
So if that motion carried, we're on to item number 7, which is highway congestion screening, and that is again Dale.
I have to share my screen first. Okay. Hopefully you can all see the presentation for highway congestion screening. All right. So hopefully you all recall, as part of the 2040 LRTP and again for the 2045 LRTP, we established regional priority project selection guidelines. This was approved by the LRTP subcommittee back in July of this year. And moving forward, I've got to retrain my brain that regional priority projects, I'll have to start making a distinction between highway and transit. But these guidelines are for highway projects only in terms of what we would refer to as regional priority projects. So for the 2045 LRTP, the highway selection guidelines are shown here on the left. That we will include all committed regional priority highway projects from the 2040 Long Range Transportation Plan. And this is per an HRTPO resolution, which I'll show in the next slide. And then also factor in HRTPO express lanes. There's a supporting resolution that is based on project readiness and the express lanes enhancing our regional priority projects. All projects, highway projects must be consistent with the HB 2313 legislation, which states that these projects must provide the most congestion relief for the most number of citizens, and for HRTF that they can only be highway projects, and then meet a regional project cost threshold of 100 million. So this is one of the resolutions that helped produce those guidelines. I won't read all of it, but essentially in bold at the bottom is stating that essentially all committed 2040 regional priority projects automatically go into the 2045 LRTP, and all candidate regional priority projects that aren't committed are to be evaluated as part of the development of the 2045, meaning they go back in the mix. You know, we have this new base network now with the 5 billion of construction that's going on now, reassessing, you know, where is the regional need in terms of congestion after we inject the 5 billion of HRTF funds again for the construction that's going on now. And then the other HRTPO resolution was passed earlier this year, and that identifies and adopts the Regional Express Lanes Network as a component of the regional priority projects. And that this resolution also requests that HRTAC develop a funding plan and implementation plan for the Express Lanes Network based on project readiness. So this is just a summary slide of those 2040 LRTP regional priority highway projects. The projects in green are the ones that are already completed. The orange ones are the ones that, you know, we're interested in terms of committed for 2045 LRTP, which I'll cover in the next few slides, but it's segment 3 of the 64 Peninsula widening, phase 2 of the 64 264 interchange, phase 1 of 64 Southside widening, and the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. All the other projects that were regional priority projects are being evaluated and have to compete to be included in the 2045 LRTP. So this is HRTAC's 6-year funding plan, and I've showed this slide before, but it's to show you for those committed projects, what does that represent in terms of money? So if you add up the balance to complete for 64 Peninsula Segment 3, Phase 2 of the interchange, Phase 1 of high rise and HRBT, then you throw in the express lanes network components that have already been identified and some operating HRTF fees that HRTAC has to account for. That's $4.4 billion already that has to come off the top of the HRTAC forecast that we get for the 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan. That's a significant amount of money that's already been promised. I throw up these numbers just to give people some perspective for the 2040 LRTP. For HRTF assumptions, we had $8.5 billion to constrain the regional priority highway projects. For 2045, I have no idea. I mean, my guess would it would be similar. But until we see the forecast from HRTAC, we don't know for sure. But again, $4.4 billion is already committed. So as part of identifying which candidate projects can compete and be eligible for HRTF, we have a screening process that's embedded into our overall project selection process for the 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan. So on this slide, you see we have our candidate projects. We evaluate and prioritize these projects, which we just covered with our prioritization scores. Then we have to do this HRTF screen. And there's several components based on the selection guidelines that I just covered. The 3 main being, does it meet the cost threshold? And for those that might be new to the committee, the cost threshold is it's like a proxy to identify those mega projects. When the legislation was passed, it was made very clear that these funds could only be used on mega regional projects, not on I would hate to say smaller scope because it's still big projects, but mega projects. So this $100 million cost threshold was established, which is honestly probably too low for today's estimates, but we still use that $100 million cost threshold. Then we have a congestion screen to make sure that we're only looking at fiscally constraining projects with HRTF for those projects that provide the most congestion relief. And then we also have some origin destination maps to show demand to meet that part of the legislation that says we're providing congestion relief for the most number of citizens. So today we're talking about the results of the HRTF screen. Looking ahead, we will apply fiscal constraints, ultimately conformity, air quality conformity, and then plan adoption. And these are high level. There's lots of little steps that have to go into making these high level milestones. So in terms of HRTF, and again, this is all highway, we're not discounting transit at all, but per the legislation, HRTF can only be used on highway projects. For our congestion screen, we use our prioritization tool. We did this as part of the 2040. We're just using the data we already have to identify and make sure that the candidate projects that are even being considered for fiscal constraint meet that congestion threshold. So the measures I show on this slide are for our roadway projects, so it'd be bridge, tunnel, and highway projects. Congestion within our prioritization tool is under project utility, and specifically for these congestion measures, it's 40 points, so 40 of the 300 that we use for this congestion screen. And these congestion measures look at percent reduction between existing and future volume to capacity ratios. It looks at existing peak period congestion level, existing peak period level of service, change in person throughput, change in person hours of delay, impact to nearby roadways. And I'd like to make a note here that existing congestion levels are used mostly for this congestion measure, and they're based on the most recent travel time and traffic count data, primarily between 2017 and 2019. So again, congestion screen is just a way to filter out those projects that don't meet that congestion level, but by no means does this 40 points represent the entire 300 points possible for a project. So in terms of our bridge and tunnel candidate projects, first we applied our $100 million cost threshold, and then we looked at the congestion scores. Our congestion screen threshold for all of our roadway projects is 20 points. That's half of the possible congestion points. So what you see on this slide are the projects that meet both the cost threshold and the congestion screen threshold. And that would be the two bridge tunnel projects along 664, phase 2 of South Side high-rise bridge widening, and the 564, 664 connector, and the 164 connector, essentially Patriots Crossing and Cray Island connector. Again, congestion screen. So if you see a project on these next few slides, it means it made the congestion screen. It can still compete potentially for HRTF. So in terms of highway, the projects you see here are the projects that, again, were above the $100 million cost threshold and above the 20-point congestion screen threshold. So we have the Chesapeake Expressway widening, 664 Bowers Hill to College Drive, 664 Hampton Coliseum to Terminal Avenue, 264 widening and the preferred alternative along 264, which is Independence to Rosemont, and the VA 164 widening from Painters Point to 664. So all these highway projects are still HRTF eligible. Our interchange projects, the congestion measures are slightly different than the bridge, tunnel, and highway measures. So on this screen, you can see for interchange, we look at existing queue conditions, we look at queue improvements, still look at change in person throughput, change in person hour of delay, and also the number of movements added or improved due to the project. And the same for these interchange projects is existing congestion levels are based on the most recent travel time and traffic count data, primarily from 2017 to 2019. I make this distinction because, as you all know, we have major construction projects going on right now. So some of the benefits of the construction projects that are ongoing aren't necessarily captured in some of this existing data. So this screen's a little bit harder to see, but we have several interchange candidate projects that meet both the $100 million cost threshold and the 20 points. So these include 264 Independence Interchange, Air Terminal Interchange, the 64 Denby Boulevard Interchange. And again, I'm not saying it, but these are all candidate projects. Bowers Hill interchange. We scored this both under highway and under the interchange because it's a longer segment, Bowers Hill to College Drive. 264 Rosemont interchange, 64 North King Street, and then multiple phases of the 264 interchange. We have A through F, and also, I'll get to that, 64 464 and 64 Fort Eustis. Now, under the red line on this screen, these are associated smaller scope projects with a larger project that did meet the screen. So that would be additional phases of the 64 264 interchange. Even the last one, 64 Northampton Boulevard, that is a piece of the 64 264 interchange. All of these, because they're associated with improvements to 64 264, can still be HRTF eligible. And ultimately, what's fiscally constrained and built need to be independent segments, because not all these segments can be built on its own. They need prerequisite phases of 64 264. So the last thing we did for the HRTF eligibility screen is produce these origin destination maps. And this is just to sort of answer that question, does this candidate project, will it potentially provide congestion relief for a large number of Hampton Roads citizens? So the dots on these maps are meant to show demand. So each dot represents trip-ins, and one dot represents 50 trip-ins. So on the left, you have 664 Monitor Merrimack. You can see there's a large distribution, large quantity of trip-ins across the region. Same for 64 Southside Harrows Bridge. No surprise here. These are both critical corridors for our region. Then we have 564, 664, and Virginia 164 connector. Not quite as many in terms of quantity for trip-ins, but still, a good enough regional distribution that it can still be considered eligible for HRTF. Chesapeake Expressway, same thing. The trip-ins are more focused on the south side, but there's enough quantity and distribution on the south side that it can still be considered eligible for HRTF funds. We have the 264 widening. Here we're just showing the preferred alternative, but again, a large number of trip-ins in the region, and then same with the VA 164 widening. We have the 64 264 interchange and Bowers Hill interchange. Again, no surprise that we'd have a lot of trip-ins across the region for these two candidate projects. We have 264 Independence and 264 Rosemont. Still, we have a lot of trip-ins, mostly focused on the south side, but enough that you would say that these projects represent enough trips in the region that these projects are still eligible for HRTF. Same with Denby and Fort Eustis along 64. Most of the trips, not surprising, are on the peninsula, but in enough quantity that they're still eligible. And 64 Northampton. This that we also refer to as phase AI because it's part of the 64 264 interchange phases, and then 64 464 interchange. And both projects still eligible for HRTF. The only projects that we see as not having a sufficient amount of regional trips based on these origin destination maps would be the 64 North King Street interchange, and then the air terminal interchange. Again, each dot represents 50 trip-ins, but compared to the other maps, these have the fewest amount of trip-ins across the region. So, we would suggest that these don't have a sufficient amount of regional trips for HRTF eligibility. They're still very, strong candidate projects for traditional LRTP revenues and fiscal constraint, but not specifically for the HRTF. So this table is a summary that shows for our candidate projects, after we applied the $100 million cost threshold, We had 34 potential projects that could be eligible for HRTF. After the congestion screen, that was narrowed down to 25 candidate projects. And then after the origin destination analysis, 23. 23 is still a significant number when you think that over half of a potential HRTF revenue forecast is already committed. I think realistically, we're probably only looking to add 2, maybe 3 additional regional priority projects to the 2045 LRTP. But all the 23 projects that have made it through this screen at least are eligible for that conversation for next steps when we start talking about fiscal constraint, which hopefully will be starting very soon. So in terms of next steps, we need the revenue forecast from VDOT and from HR TAC for the FY 2021-2045 time period. So just re-showing this graphic here that we've completed the screen, so we have 23 projects. Next step would now be, once we get those revenue forecasts, is applying that fiscal constraint to see which of those 23 projects can be added to the committed projects that we already have in terms of regional priority highway projects for the 2045 LRTP. So there's no action item for this particular item. Just wanted to present this information. And if anyone has any questions on this, I'd be happy to address them now.
Dale, is the presentation something that you can email out to us as well so that we can have it along with the destination origin maps? Yes, I'll be emailing all 3 of my presentations today, the comments from Southern Environmental Law Center, and also an updated table of the draft scores. I'll be emailing that out today. So did anyone have any questions or comments before we move to the next item? Hearing none, I believe item 8 is a fiscal constraint update.
Last one today. Okay, so I've shown this slide before, and we're on track with the prioritization scores to have TTAC and the board approve the scores at their January meetings. And as we've stated several times today, the next step is fiscal constraint, developing that funding plan, ultimately conformity, and then approve the 2045 LRTP at the May board meeting. Today there is no June board meeting. We might have to have a June board meeting though. In order for us to meet this deadline, we needed to have the fiscal constraint and funding plan done. And my intent was to even have the draft funding plan for TTAC at their January 6th meeting. So that would mean that I would already be working on fiscal constraints to develop funding scenarios to present to the LRTP subcommittee. However, we're still waiting on the revenue forecast from the state and from HR TAC. We were initially supposed to get the revenue forecast from the state on December 16th. And then, now they're saying hopefully before Christmas, which really means tomorrow. I don't know. I'm not going to hold my breath. So we're ready to hit the ground running. Once we get the revenue forecast from the state, we've talked with Kevin Page at HR TAC. He needs this revenue forecast before he can finalize the HR TAC forecast. And as you can see from my last presentation for roadway projects, HR TAC is really gonna, in a way, drive that ship, because we need to know first which of those mega projects can actually be constrained with HRTF, because there's a lot of great, strong projects that if they don't get HRTF fiscal consumptions, well, then they will be competing for the traditional LRTP assumptions. So we can't even begin that dialogue until we know which are our regional priority highway projects that will be constrained with HRTF estimates. So we're in a holding pattern until we can get these revenue forecasts from the state. And then, Kevin says he needs at least another week or so after the state releases them to us. So we will not have a draft funding plan or draft list of projects at the January TTAC. If we can get them in the next few days, one of the things that I'm going to float out there is to still try to meet our deadline. We're also in conversation with Federal Highway to see what happens if we can't meet that May-June deadline. Our plan will be frozen, very likely. So what does that mean? We can't amend the plan. What does that mean for the TIP? What does that mean for federal decisions? There's lots of unknowns. So it's not something that we want to have to deal with. But we recognize that it is a possibility because we don't have these revenue forecasts. And we can try to streamline it and try to do it fast, but there's still certain milestones that we cannot skip. We have to have a 30-day public review of the fiscal constrained list of projects. Conformity can take up to 3 months. I mean, maybe it can get done quicker, but I don't want to bank on that because we're relying on other federal agencies to review the conformity assessment and then give us a finding of conformity. So it's getting tighter and tighter. It's a very real possibility that we won't make that May-June deadline, but we're trying everything we can, even asking Federal Highway for, can we have a 30-day extension, even a 60-day extension? We'll take what we can get. As I sort of mentioned, Bob Crum has said, if we need to schedule a June board meeting, we'll schedule a June board meeting. So we're doing everything we can here at the TPO staff to see if we can still stay on track and not have a frozen or lapsed 2040 LRTP. What we may do with the subcommittee is if we get this revenue forecast, TPO staff wants to hit the ground running to develop these different funding scenarios and then present them to the LRTP subcommittee for response, and that maybe we can make some really good progress during the month of January. And potentially, I might float this out to January at the January TTAC is if LRTP is very comfortable with a recommendation for funding scenarios, that we can start that 30-day public review before TTAC takes official action, and then ultimately the board, just to keep us on track. So there's lots of different, plan A, B, C. I think I might be down to plan X, Y, and Z now to keep us on track. But I just want to make sure the committee is aware that this is going on. So this sort of highlights, again, we're project prioritization. That was critical, having the scores approved. Again, TTAC and the board were asking that they approve the scores in January. So we're still on time for that. And then we ideally wanted the funding plan out for public review in January. So it may be later January, maybe early February, just depends on when we can get the forecast. And hopefully that the forecast isn't significantly different than maybe what we're expecting. If it is, that's a whole different issue that we have to deal with. And then so once we can get that funding plan, 30-day public review, maybe hopeful, I'm still being very hopeful, in sometime February, March, we can get TTAC and board approval of the funding plan. Start conformity. Again, conformity, we have to factor in 3 months. While conformity is going on, we can complete the rest of the documentation of the 2045 LRTP. This would include things such as plan performance. We develop a project information guide, so there'd be a one-page summary on each project that's fiscally constrained in the plan, documentation of our public involvement efforts over the past 5 years. So it's not looking promising, but we're still trying to meet that May-June 2021 deadline to approve the 2045 LRTP. And we will keep you guys posted, maybe through email, just to let you know what's happening with the revenue forecast and the ability to start the fiscal constraint process.
Hey, Dale, this is Ray. I've got a question for you. this year is unique with the HRRTF funds that HR TAC manages for the new funding that flows from the General Assembly. There are revenue forecasts that the Virginia Department of Taxation had provided to HR TAC on those funds over at least a 10-year period. How are you reflecting that revenue stream for those projects that are associated with the HRRTF? Because I had sent you some information on those projects.
Right. So that's a great question. We know from talking with VDOT that their long-range revenue forecast, they have an estimate for regional funds, and of those regional funds, it will include HRTF highway and then the HRRTF for transit. So my understanding is it will be a base forecast. Kevin, HR TAC, then takes that base forecast, and because they have the ability to leverage those funds, it can grow. For 2040, the base HRTF forecast was about 4 or 5 billion, and then when HR TAC leverages that with their bonding capacity, that's how we ended up with 8.5 billion. So I know for highways, that's going to happen as well. For the HRRTF transit, I would assume that HR Tech would also do the same thing to say, here's the base, with the tax estimates, here's some base forecast, but with our bonding capacity, maybe we can add another billion or whatever. So we would have to reflect in the LRTP, we'd have to document and acknowledge that we have these regional transit funds, and then associate them, because I know they're very specific, just like with the highway HRTF, it can only be used on a specific subset of highway projects. It's not a free-for-all. So I understand that the transit's the same way. So working with you guys, we would need to be able to say, here's the regional backbone, right? This is the funding that is constraining that regional backbone. Now, if there is, because of his bond capacity, and this is something we can talk offline, I recognize it's not like a free-for-all for the rest of the region, but if there is, if there is extra, like how do we handle that additional capacity for transit?
Sure, Dal, and we can work with you on that. The prior slide that showed the timeline and boxes, it'd be nice, I think that's what we're showing. It'd be nice to show, here it is. Does this imply that HRRTF funds are part of this stream too? Because I have a feeling it implies HRTF funds. Is it also?
It would be both.
Okay.
So my understanding is HR TAC, when they provide the long range revenue forecast, it should be for both highway and transit.
Okay. Thank you.
And sort of on that topic too, we had our certification recently, and one of the recommendations we have a glowing certification, so that was nice. And the TPO actually, the region received some accommodations. But one of the things that they did note is they do want to make sure, with outsiders looking in, they see these regional priority projects, and one of the first things they say is, where's transit? So we want to make sure, and that's why I'm training my brain that when I say regional priority projects, I know, and you all know, that we've been constrained that they have to be highway projects. But to people outside, they're like, well, you're just calling them regional priority projects. It's not intuitive to them why it doesn't include transit. So making that distinction between HRTF for highway and HRRTF for the regional backbone.
Agreed. Thank you.
Dale, regarding you guys having conversations with federal highways and trying to get an extension, has the TPO been doing that at a staff level? Would it help at all if the board was to send some type of request or communicate with federal highways as a regional organization because of everything that's gone on over the last year that's delayed things?
Yes, that's actually something that Bob is talking about. I know we've requested, we've been in contact with Ivan, and then via email, he said, make the request via email, and sort of keep it a little informal right now. because if you go formal, well, we might not get a response till February or March. It doesn't really help us if it takes that long to get a formal response. VDOT Central Office, Finance, Wendy Thomas and Laura Farmer. I know they've also been in contact with Federal Highway to support our request. We asked for 4 months, we only get 2 months, that would make a world of difference for our plan not to lapse. I found out the Hampton Roads VDOT District Office is also either has or is composing a letter to Federal Highway. So if we don't get the revenue forecast soon, Bob is going to bring it to the board and mention it to them to then do a formal board letter as well. And he may already have started calling the chair about that to line that up.
Were there any other comments or questions?
Madam Chair, I had a question. Dale, is there a absolute cutoff for you guys needing the revenue forecast before you can in order for you to stay on schedule?
December 16th was pretty tight already. Okay. I was already going to put in late nights and weekends if we received it on December 16th. So yeah, it's going to be difficult from here on out. That's why we're saying, maybe we can have the June board meeting, which we normally wouldn't have had. That would buy me another month. But yeah, you've already passed that date, Eric.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to be sure that I understood that. I thought it was close or it had been already passed. My second question is, when you do get to the process of constraining, which pot of money will you start with first? Will you start with the HR TAP money first?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because we don't want to have a big project that maybe costs, $500 million to $1 billion and take up traditional LRTP, make assumptions about the district grant or maybe RSTP funds and constrain this massive project that could have been constrained with HRTF funds.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey Dale, this is Katie Shannon. I just wanted to say appreciate all the hard work that you and Teresa and the whole HRTPO staff has put into this. I know it's been made even more difficult with COVID and everything virtual, so it's much appreciated and does not go unnoticed.
Well, thank you very much. It's definitely a team effort. I've hit every department at the TPO to help. Keith probably gets tired of hearing from me and the rest too. So we appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Okay, I'm taking a look at the rest of the agenda. There's some information or report from the TPO board meeting under for your information. Am I looking at the right agenda here?
No, we don't have anything under for your information.
Okay, and then no old or new business. And do we still tentatively have a meeting scheduled for January?
Tentatively, but it's not likely. If I don't have a revenue forecast to show you guys, I don't see calling you in for
that. Well, I guess the good news means that you can take Christmas off, right?
Yes. It's a blessing in disguise.
I believe unless anyone had anything else, we're able to go ahead and close the meeting. Well, thanks everybody and have a good holiday.
Yeah. See everyone next year.
Thanks everyone. Jamie, thanks for stepping in. Appreciate it.
Right? Hey, we do what we have to do. Hey, Brian.
On par for 2020. Hey, Brian.
Stand up and my noon meeting is supposed to be 20 minutes, not. But thanks for jumping in and getting the panel. Appreciate it.
Maybe not smoothly, but Dale at least knows what she's doing.
Oh, that's all right.
Oh, it's all smooth.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
All right, take care.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Robert.